Are you troubled by strange noises?
Came out a 6-foot black silhouette of a cowboy with a cowboy hat. He had a duster on.
You said there's lights in the sky?
Yeah, there's 4 lights. It's moving real slow. Real slow.
It's showtime.
The Emit Blackwell Show, diving into the creative minds of sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and paranormal authors. Their fantasy is our reality. Hello, this is Emit Blackwell, and we are back. I am here with R Stateham, an author, who has done quite a bit of collective works. And BR, are you there?
I'm here. Thank you, by the way, for inviting me on.
Oh, no problem. Thank you very much for being here on the show. You do have quite a bit of collective works, and it's admirable. So we're going to check into that right now and just jump right into this. So when you first started writing books, when did you first begin writing?
Well, you can peg that up at 9 years old. I was an avid Edgar Rice Burroughs fan, science fiction, and I was also into Robert Heinlein, who is hard science fiction, and so I decided one day to sit down with a ream of paper, lined paper, and write a hardcore space ships and ray gun science fiction.
Wow.
And shared that around with my immediate family, and from then on, from 9 years old on, I've been writing.
Wow. So just paper and pen, right?
Actually, it was just paper and pencil.
Oh, saves on a lot of those mistakes, and just in case.
Yeah, I use big erasers.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. So you said that you were inspired by quite a bit of authors. Was it all from like reading, or did you watch any movies or anything that inspired you too?
Oh, certainly. I mean, I from starting at 7 or 8, I was deep into reading science fiction, and I think I was 10 years old when I read The Odyssey and the Iliad, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
And I read all of Heinlein and Asimov and Andre Norton and all those, and then I, of course, back then our family wasn't that well equipped as far as money went, so all the science fiction, for instance, I saw on television, but I actually remember sitting at 6 or 7 years old in front of the TV set watching the old 1930s Flash Gordon series on TV, and loved that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And still love that stuff.
That's awesome.
So I've been rather avid as far as watching movies, sci-fi movies, and hardcore noir movies, and doing the writing in both those genres equally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you got quite a big collection here. I'm looking at your Amazon.com website, and anybody who's out there, if you want to check out this type of writing, for one, BR does a lot of novellas that are kind of short reads. They're good stories. It's something that you can read on a Sunday afternoon or a Sunday evening, and you're actually on Kindle Unlimited too, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Wow. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up the phone lines. I know that there's a lot of people out there. They're probably new authors. They're probably people who just want to hear a little bit more backstory about some of these books that you've written. And we'll be going through the collection here in just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and pull up that phone number. And if you want to give us a call here at the Emit Blackwell Show to speak to BR, the phone number is 260-527-2068. And we're going to get that right up for you. All right. And BR, the series that you're currently working on, is this the Turner and Frank detective series? Are these the new ones that we have on the screen there?
I have a confession to make. I'm not working on just a series. There are a number of things I'm writing almost simultaneously.
Mm-hmm.
I have the the third book of the Turner Hahn Frank Morales detective series in the works, about a third of the way done. And then I've got, I have a full-length Smitty novel that's being out, circulating around to a few publishers, waiting to hear from them. Then I've got a couple of science fiction writings that I'm working with. I haven't decided yet if they're going to be novellas or if they're going to be full-length novels. And then I've created a new character that's in the hard noir genre that I'm really excited about.
Mm-hmm.
That's about halfway done. So it's not any one particular thing. My little fingers get bloody sometimes writing on so many different things.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, that's, the passion of a writer right there. So I'm going to kind of go through your collections here. I'm looking at them right now, and, the book covers actually look really intriguing, too. The first 3 books that pop up are the Turner and Frank Detective Series, and if you want to, I think it's 3 books that you have on that?
Yeah,
okay.
Right now, currently 3.
So what's...
2 books, 2 full-length novels, and then there's several collections of short stories in that.
Okay.
But,
so can you give us like a background story on where that series came from and where it all started?
Well, have you ever read anything by Ed McBain?
No.
Novel Ed McBain. Ed McBain had a series called the 87th Precinct. And it was a series of novels featuring the entire detective section of the 87th Precinct, which was basically New York City.
Mm-hmm.
But I got interested in that, at a real early age. And when I became more of an adult, it occurred to me that I wanted to write a detective series that in many ways harkens back to the 1940s type of real whodunits, the real mystery, the mysteries within mysteries, and the red herrings and the lies and the deceits and the traps that people set up for each other. And at the same time, I wanted to write a novel or a series that had 2 people who were cops working side by side as partners, each with a full 3-dimensional personality to them. And each personality is different than the other, but somehow those 2 work together.
Mm-hmm. And now,
I want to go ahead.
Because you do have quite a bit of characterization within this, did you pull anything from your personal experiences in order to get those characters built up?
Oh, just the minor things. Like, for instance, Turner likes fast cars and the old classic cars of the 50s to the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
I love those things. And he likes to read, so he has a book collection. And you won't be surprised to hear that I have somewhat of a book collection myself. And Frank is he's got a photographic memory, and he's a giant. And I'm 6'4" with a square face, as you see on my photo there, and I have just the perfect hairdo for a square face or a rectangular face like mine.
Mm-hmm.
So Frank is part me as well, and Turner is part me, but there's a lot of those 2 that are uniquely their own. And that's the one thing I've found out about writing any character that I write.
Mm-hmm.
You get deep enough into their character, and they come alive themselves. They have their own quirks and their own personalities that are not from the author at all. It comes out of the ether.
Are there any other characters within that series that kind of stick out as being really big game changers within the story?
In the Turner Hahn series?
Yeah.
No, actually, the predominant personalities are Turner and Frank. Or at least in the first 2 novels of the first 3 novels. This one that I'm working on now, I'm introducing some new characters that are also homicide detectives or detectives out of the particular precinct they're from. and it's a man and woman combination that are rather unique on their own, and I thought I'd throw them in just to make the series, more complex, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
and a little more colorful. And so, but really, I try to concentrate on Turner and Frank when I'm writing that series because they are so, in my opinion, they're so, they captivate your imagination so much.
Yeah, and I'm looking here too at these little short novellas that you have. As far as a theme that you have going on with those, what type of theme do you have, or are they all single different stories, or?
It's just in the Turner Hahn series, it's always a compelling homicide.
Mm-hmm.
The stories always open up with them being at a site where there's a dead man or a dead person, and they're never a straightforward A to B, follow this clue to this clue to this clue, and you'll solve it. There's always something weird about it, something quirky, something that they run into a dead end and they got to start all over. And
Mm-hmm.
the whole idea, one of the other originating ideas about this Turner series is that in the novels, they work at least 2 homicide cases at once,
Mm-hmm.
and they're totally unrelated. So most real-life homicide groups, if they live in a big city that has a high homicide rate, never work on one case and one case only. They've got to multitask their investigations. And
Yeah.
so that's what Turner and Frank do. They hop from one case to the next until they get both of them solved. And neither case is it easy.
Mm-hmm.
They require a lot of thinking, a lot of false clues to follow, a lot of they really harken back to the 1940s when you had Dashiell Hammett writing about his writings, or Raymond Chandler when he wrote about Philip Marlowe. They were just dark and puzzlers, and you just couldn't easily pick out who was the bad guy.
And is the story set in like any type of time frame? You mentioned that it's like the 1940s and 30s. Is it set in that time frame, or is it set in modern day?
No, it's set in modern day, but
Okay.
it harkens back to the dark, shadowy imagery of the 1940s. It seems like in modern times, we have lost this idea, this vision of dark shadows and strange noises that we can't identify.
And does it kind of follow that same type of inner monologue that a lot of those guys would write, and they would use
It's got a lot of sharp dialogue, or at least I think it does.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of, both Turner and Frank, for instance, are a bit of a smartass. And
That's what we like to see in characters.
They don't like higher authority too much, you know. And the police department they work for is a little bit on the corrupt side, so you don't know who you're really talking to.
All right. Now, there's another, I want to also remind our viewers and listeners here, if you want to call in, you want to talk to BR, that phone number again is 260-527-2068. I am going to leave the lines open for a little bit longer here, and I want to talk again, or at least talk about this Maurice series. I saw this, and I was kind of blown away when I saw what he actually does. What is that all about?
All right, that's a little story in itself. I'm sitting at my computer writing,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of these stories especially the characters, just pop into my head. And I was trying to create a character that would do two things. It would kind of act to put two different genres together, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Say the hard-boiled noir plus the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
And then it occurred to me, well, what kind of personality would this guy be? So imagine, if you will, a Perry Mason, a regular Perry Mason novel, and then you put in not Harry Potter, but somebody that's like Harry Potter that checks out supernatural.
Okay.
And so I come up with Maurice. He is it's actually kind of like a Perry Mason meets Charlie Chan.
Ah, yeah.
And that's what this guy is. He's Perry Mason. There's a lot of courtroom scenes in these novels, and then there's also the dark alleys and the supernatural creeping in. And Maurice is a practicing attorney who represents the recently departed.
That is great. It just sounds so authentic and original. I have never heard any story like that. And the fact that you can combine those two, was it a smooth process? Did it kind of flow?
Actually, it was. I mean, Maurice has a law firm. He's the only lawyer in the firm, but he has two people working for him.
Wow.
One person is an ex-felon that was originally charged for the murder of his daughter and grandson, whom Maurice successfully got him off scot-free because he was innocent. And then the other one, it happens to be the guy's dead daughter.
Oh. Okay.
So we have investigators. These two are investigators for Maurice. One investigates the living, and one goes into the afterworld and investigates what's going on in the afterworld.
Oh, well, it sounds good. And I think that I'm actually in front of my computer as well, obviously. That's going to be the first one I buy from you, just because it sounds so interesting. So another thing that you said is the Smitty series.
Yes. I have to be. I love all my characters. I mean, I love Maurice. But the three characters that I really go for are Turner and Frank and Smitty. And I told you earlier that Smitty had a little bit of a history behind him.
Yeah.
Smitty actually started out about 5-6 years ago. There used to be an online little writing site called, I think it was called 6 Sentences, where this writing group gave you word prompts, and you had to write a story in 6 sentences.
Oh, wow.
And so one day this writing prompt came up, and it had a few words in it, and I don't really remember the words, but I decided I'd write about a hitman who finished his contract by blowing the apartment up that a mob boss walks into. Just blows the crap out of the place. And oddly enough, 2 things happened. Once I put his name down, Smitty, the full character just exploded into my head. I mean, I knew why he became the way he was. I knew where he was going. I knew the code of honor he was using. I had about 4 or 5 stories pop into my head at once, and it just went from there. But the interesting thing about Smitty is that he is somewhat the opposite of Turner and Frank. Oh. Turner and Frank are the law-abiding, you have to live it within the law. If you do something bad, the law has to come after you. Smitty is the hitman, the professional killer, if you will, who has his own code of honor, but he doesn't necessarily follow the letter of the law to get things done. Turns out that his victims, if you will, are always bad guys. They're not the innocent. They're always the bad guys. But Smitty is really ruthless.
Well, that's a good contrast, too.
Done.
Yeah. And then you had mentioned when we were talking earlier before the show that you had some sci-fi stuff or some other stuff that you were working on just recently.
Well, I wrote a couple of short stories, at least one short story, a novel actually, about here's the basis for it. The character's name is Agnastus Julia. And what he is he's a secret agent. Oh. But he's a secret agent from the far future that has a technology that is both scientifically based and based in the realm of magic.
Oh, wow.
The basis behind the idea is that I want another merge hard science fiction with fantasy, magic and hard science fiction. And Agnastus Julia, it works for a thing called the IDMB, the Interdimensional Magic Bureau.
Oh, cool.
And in fact, that was one of the things, one of the partials I was thinking about reading for you if you were interested.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But if you're interested in Maurice, I could read a part of that too.
Well, actually, Maurice, I think I'm gonna let our viewers catch that book themselves. I want to hear this sneak peek that you got.
The Agnastus?
Yes.
Well, hold on. Let me see if I can find him.
Yeah, it sounds so interesting. All
Well,
right, you ready?
This is the first full novella.
All right.
And I was going to make it a series of novellas about him, and I've got the first one done, and it's out. And the problem with me is that, if you don't mind me cussing a little bit, I've got so much shit I'm writing, it's just difficult to stay on track with everything.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I fully understand. I fully understand. Especially when you...
So now, Agnastus, I'm trying to write, along with the other stuff I'm writing, I'm trying to write a full-length novel of Agnastus. But he's an interesting character. He is sort of a flippant, arrogant, super rich type of guy that has a heart of gold, but strange. He's just strange.
Well, if you want to go ahead and read that excerpt, I would definitely like to hear it.
Well, this is the one complete novella that I've got. It's just entitled Maurice. Well, no, that's not. I'm sorry, I've got the wrong one up.
Oh, that's no problem.
See, there you go. I'm writing so many stuff, I got it all confused myself. So, hold on just a second. Let me see if I can find him.
Yep, no problem. And once again, I'm going to remind everybody out there, we do still have the phone lines open. That phone number, once again, is 260-527-2068 if you want to go ahead and contact us. BR would love to take your questions and talk about anything you want to talk about, any type of topic, especially about some of the new stuff he's writing. And just like BR stated, he is all over the place when it comes to writing, and that's good because you jump from topic to topic, from story to story. And honestly, a lot of the writers out there, you start with a character and then something comes up and you're like, oh, that character alone could be turned into a whole nother story. And I think, if I'm not wrong, BR, is that kind of like what you're doing? Is that you come up with a character?
Oh yeah, you think you're going to go down this road and like this story, and about halfway down, something happens out of the sky blue. A character says something, or something happens to the character, and all of a sudden you're down this other dark alley. and unfortunately, that's the way I write. I don't write with planned A to B, A to B to A to D, C, and all that down the road. It's not a planned outline. It's just catch as catch can when I write.
Oh, so. There you go. Were you able to find that excerpt on that?
Well, I tell you, I have found real quick the opening first chapter, basically, of the Agnastus Julia novel. Yeah. And entitled, My Name is Agnastus Julia.
All right, let's go with that.
All right. The opening chapter starts out in the upper left-hand corner of the page, and it looks like it is the secret cipher from one agency to another. And it starts out, Interdimensional Magic Bureau communique, classification XXX Mage, eyes only, from IDMB Intercouncil Chamber Bureau 666 to Department Head, Chief of Termination Unit. Subject, Brilliant Klansman Ignatius Julia. Message, target has been assigned to case. He should be arriving on Earth shortly. Ignatius assigned to termination. Ignatius agents assigned to termination squad should approach target cautiously. Target is a level 2 mage in Boolean magic and is both quite adept and quite original in contemplating his assignments. Agents should use extreme prejudice protocols in terminating targets. End of message.
Wow.
So chapter 1.
I like that.
It was an abandoned house, a large 3-story Victorian mansion, long since discarded and left to an obvious low death. It sat on a large corner lot, deep in the interior of the lot, surrounded by weeds, runaway gardens full of roses, and old willows which filled the lot with dark crevices and moving shadows. Everyone in the neighborhood knew ghosts lived in that old house. People swore that they saw creatures moving past the broken glass panes of the many large windows, both during the day and night. Others were willing to testify on stacks of holy Bibles they had observed odd-colored balls of light floating around the house. A few even insisted that they saw the balls of light, many of them a kind of tangerine or lime green color, seeping out of the exterior walls of the house and zooming off into the night at incredible speeds. Dogs never walked on the sidewalks next to the house. They would cross the street half a block away, breaking out into a brisk trot as they approached and passed the house from the opposite side of the street. Cats hissed, their hair on their arched backs lifting straight up into the air whenever they neared the place. Even the neighborhood children, even the bullies of the lot, hurried past the house anytime, day or night. They had heard the creepy stories about the house. Many had seen the strange lights inside. None dared to step off the sidewalk and penetrate the wilderness of the corn lot to investigate. So one can imagine the surprise when, on a bright Sunday morning, when the sunlight in the air, with the sun high in the air and not a cloud in the sky, a black hansom, pulled by an astonishingly beautiful black Arabian mare, came smartly down the brick street and pulled up beside the curb directly in front of the mansion and came to a halt. Sitting high on the hansom's driver's seat was the image of a badly dressed curmudgeon who was a month behind in his need for a fresh shave. Atop his head was a top hat, which looked as if it had been crushed several times and then somehow hammered back into shape with a couple of hard fists. The squat, wide-shouldered creature was dressed in what, at his second and even third glance, appeared to be the cast-offs of several different styles of tuxedos. In one hand, as he sat on the high seat of the hansom, he held a very long whip used by cabbies to coax a little more speed out of the modes of transportation. In the other hand, he held the reins of the mare with a casual ease. Clamped tightly shut between a pair of thick, pale lips was the stem of a Mercian pipe. Watery, light blue eyes of an apparent alcoholic stared out at the world as he sat motionally in the seat. Both the horse and the man seemed to be waiting for someone. Both appeared to be quite willing to wait all day and all night if they had to, which, in fact, they would, since they weren't alive. Not alive in the sense of a corporeal, air-breathing creatures composed of flesh and blood. No, these creatures were mechanical devices, androids, if you will. Class 4 Hagian clan-goids with level 6 magic enhancements in their neural implants. In other words, mechanical being magicians of limited powers. There were 2 droids assigned by the IDMB to protect a valued asset, to protect and, more importantly, to monitor the actions and intentions of a level 2 magician by the name of Ignatius Julia. IDMB agent Ignatius Julia, a Brilliant clan-trained magician temporarily signed to the Interdimensional Magic Bureau for the last 140 years. A specialist in ST operation, searching out and destroying clandestine operations of any of the 1,000 different worlds hosting sentient life forms. The IDMB formally declared it as neutral territory. Clandestine operations conceived and implemented by the Korean League. The yin and the yang, Pilgrim, the balance of all seen and unseen forces which allow the universes, as we know them, to maintain some form of harmony with each other. The maintenance of equilibrium, and tilting in the balance between too much good or too much evil, between too much white magic or too much dark magic, creates an imbalance which begins to accumulate toward entropy. Think of a finely wrought clock, a clock with millions upon millions of moving gears and interlocking springs. Remove a tooth from just one of the millions of gears, just one tiny little tooth from one small significant gear, and entropy begins to build. The cessation of movement. Over time, perhaps over eons and eons of accumulated time, that one missing tooth in the finely wrought timepiece begins to create errors. The errors build up, errors which are never compensated or adjusted. At some point in time, the errors accumulate to massive proportions, so massive the finely wrought timepiece fails. The timepiece slows and eventually stops. Darkness consumes the light. Goodness is destroyed by evil. Life in all forms spread across billions and billions of worlds, extinguished forever, never to reappear. Space and time fade away, to be replaced by nothing. There is no light, no darkness, no laughter, no sentient thought, no sadness, no music, no love, just nothing. Entropy. That's the start of it.
Wow. That is extremely creative. That is really good.
Let me apologize for the way I read. I am not, although I did practice a little bit earlier today in reading this, as you well note, I am not a professional at reading scripts out loud. So.
Oh, no. That's okay. I mean, the story is very good. I mean, the combination between this sci-fi and magical world and everything that's riding on it. The entropy is what you called it, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Entropy is a scientific term that means movement. Everything that's in movement eventually dissolves into nothing or no movement.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're all going to entropy, human beings have entropy when we call it death.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what entropy is. Everything dies.
Well, I like the start of that. It's so detailed. It really gives the reader that concept of once something falls out of balance, it's very hard to get it back. And that's amazing because, for one, you're combining two different types of extremely unbalanced genres into something that is now becoming balanced in this story. And I'm kind of surprised that you were able to fit this all into one type of thing. It could almost start a whole subgenre of sci-fi crime, sci-fi magic crime. I don't even know where to put this thing, but it sounds good.
Well, yeah, I have to admit I'm struggling with it a little bit because I haven't fully figured out in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned earlier that I don't sit down with a piece of paper and outline the entire story, but what I do in my head is basically do the outline, but I don't do detail at the time. It's just a rough draft of generally where the story is going, and that general drift in the story can change at any moment when something happens. But with Agnestis, I'm having a little bit of a problem. But
well, that's okay. I mean, for what you got, to come up with such an original idea, and I'm sure you've seen this just about everywhere nowadays. There's very few original ideas and so many remakes out there that it's almost like when you do see a new creative original idea, it's really amazing to a lot of people. And I think that we've lost that. Even in writing, we see a lot of that too, where people just kind of follow a trend, or you know, there's like when the Twilight series came out, everybody was following the vampire series. And it,
well,
you know,
and that's the other thing that has gripped me over the years is the older I've become. I'm 68 right now.
Mm-hmm.
and I'll be 69 in about a month. But over the years, I've come to the point that if somebody writes Raymond Chandler, for instance, everybody's got to copy that same type of guy as a detective, private detective. In fact, there's been a study about that. If you take in all the major detectives that have been written in the last 40 years, they're all within 1 inch of each other in height, and they all have the same color of hair, and they all have basically the same color of eyes, and essentially the same personality. And, you know, when you get my age, 68, which I don't think is particularly old, you know, you do get to the point where you get highly frustrated because you're just reading the same guy over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And that bugs me. That really bugs me.
Well, see, and then at the same time, you have the writing style too with some of your other works to bring back a style that was used in the 1940s and 50s, and that right there is amazing to a lot of people too, because they don't get to see that very often. They might see a detective show similar to CSI, and that's about all they get. And your genre brings back that whole inner monologue and extreme detail and stuff like that. So I'm very impressed, BR, to just straight up tell you.
Well, and that's the other thing I do is a lot of my stories start out with the very first page. It starts out. I come up with a scene, a visual scene that tries to put in all 5 senses, and then I write that scene, and from there I write the setup, and from there I write the entire novel. And when I write, I try to make my writing almost like a movie script, but in a verbal sense. So every chapter you go to, you get this different, strong image. And a lot of writer critics will say that that's not the way to go, that you want to just put enough detail in there to let the reader come up with a vague idea of what's being done or what it looks like.
Yeah.
But it's always a battle between too much detail and not enough detail. And so I walk a fine line into that. But I'm definitely a person that I want to have more detail of what's happening.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. And that kind of leads me up to my next question, BR. Because, I mean, I'm sure you see a lot of authors that are trying to get started, especially on Twitter and things like that. What is some good advice that you give them as far as this journey that they take?
One, develop a very thick skin.
Yeah.
2, expect. Well, I honestly hope that any new writer that wants to start writing, I hope they are the lucky ones that write their very first book and their very first short story, and then all of a sudden they're making millions of dollars. But I'm here to tell you that it's almost a 99% assurity that it's going to be years, if at all, that you will ever be recognized. You know, or ever make it. You know, they say, for instance, that the number of writers in this country, in the United States, that write full time and make their living off of just writing their fiction, you can probably count on 10 fingers. Everybody else has got secondary or third or more jobs. Yeah, and that's quite true. That's quite true. I've got all this stuff out there, but to be honest with you, it's almost impossible to break into a major publishing house.
Yeah, it's
almost impossible to find a literary agent. I mean, it's just. I mean, everybody wants to be a writer.
Yeah, well, hopefully with things changing, BR, and that's why, you know, I'm doing this right now, is bringing the indie writer into the population and say, hey, we have the original ideas. We are the people who are not going to be following the same rules as every other writer that's come before us, and all the remakes and all of the redos and the sequels that last for 5 movies just to make money. that independent idea, those original ideas, are something that's really needs to be noticed. And, when it comes to agents, and I've talked to a few over the years, agents, I mean, it's not that they're bad. They're very good at what they do. They're very business mind oriented, and they know what they're talking about, but they also don't like to take many risks. And
I agree with there so much.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the most conservative person in the world is not a banker.
Yeah.
It is a literary agent. And right there with him in the same seat is a major publisher.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they are deathly afraid of breaking the mold.
Yeah.
If there's any two groups of people that are in a mold and want to stay in that mold because it's over the years proved to be successful financially for them, it's literary agents and publishers. And I'm not, I'm not anti-literary agent and anti-publisher. I understand where they're coming from.
Oh, yeah,
but
I do too. Yeah.
the reading market is so wide open and should be so wide open that there ought to be niches for everybody to fit into.
Mm-hmm.
And there ought to be readers for each of those niches. And I'm sure there are readers out there that might be interested in my stuff.
Oh,
if
yeah.
I can just get it up.
And see, that's the thing, BR. Just talking to you within this short time, okay?
Yeah.
Hearing about the stories that you're talking about, the faith that I have in the independent book industry has really grown. I've talked to 2 other authors, and I've got another one that I'm going to be talking to next weekend. It's a author duo, and each time I talk to these people, the one thing that sticks out like a sore thumb is that these ideas are good, they're entertaining, and just because it's independent doesn't mean that it can't go anywhere. And on that note, BR, I would just like to thank you once more for coming onto this show.
Sure. Yeah, it was nice. It's been nice.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. I do really hope that you put that story into motion, because I really like the concept. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get that Maurice book myself. So I'll be reading it tonight on my Kindle. And I'd just like to thank you once more for being here on the show. Thank you so much, BR.
Oh, glad to be here. I'm glad you invited me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. You have a good night, all right?
All right. Good night to you and your audience.
Yeah, thank you. See you later.
All right.
All right. And BR, I tell you, BR Stateham, BR Stateham, very, very creative man, very passionate about what he does. And that right there is the whole point of this show. The Emit Blackwell show was started for authors, independent authors who wanted to get their voice out there. I believe in that. I believe that every one of those independent authors out there had the chance to put their original story on the line and say, this is me. This is my story. And on that note, I'd like to thank you all once again for joining me for the Emit Blackwell show. You have a good night.
Are you troubled by strange noises?
Came out a 6-foot black silhouette of a cowboy with a cowboy hat. He had a duster on.
You said there's lights in the sky?
Yeah, there's a 4 lights. It's moving real slow. Real slow.
It's showtime.
The Emit Blackwell Show, diving into the creative minds of sci-fi, horror, fantasy, and paranormal authors. Their fantasy is our reality.